Well, we've been looking at the book of Ephesians, and if you'll remember, we left off last week with putting off the old, and I told you about my sweaty old clothes and tried to draw a parallel there. And just to remind you, in chapter 4, verses 1 through 22, we said that the dirty old stuff that we had on as non-believers was futility of minds, darkened understanding, ignorance, hardness of heart, sensuality, and impurity. We were to lay them all aside, the old self. Lay them aside. Don't pick them back up. Don't put them back on. You've been cleansed by Jesus. You don't need those filthy rags back on again. And then he tells us to put on something. In Ephesians 4, verses 23 through 29, let me read it to you, then let's go back and look at it in detail. And that you be renewed in the spirit of your mind, put on the new self, which is in the likeness of God, and has been created in righteousness, holiness, and truth. Therefore, laying aside falsehood, speak truth to each other with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. Be angry, and yet do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and do not give the devil an opportunity. He who steals must steal no longer, but must rather labor, performing with his own hands what is good, so that he will have something to share with one who has need. Let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but only such a word as is good for edification, according to the need of the moment, so that it will give grace to those who hear. Let's pull it apart a little bit. Remember, we took off the old futile minds, the darkened understanding, the ignorance, the hardness of heart, the sensuality, and the impurity. We got cleansed by Jesus, and we're to lay aside that old stuff. And then we're to put on, or we're to renew in the mind and the spirit, a new self which is in the likeness of God. That's a pretty high standard. Being created in righteousness and holiness, a truth. Now, he gives us some contrast here as he goes through the next couple of verses 25 through 29. He talks about the old self, and he says, put off falsehood, put on truth. They're opposites. He says, put off bitterness that comes out of anger. It's okay to be angry, but the bitterness and the non-forgiveness and the non-straightening it out of things is bad. So the old self is bitterness and anger. The new self is forgiveness. The old self was stealing, theft, and the new self is laboring for good things. Now, there's a secondary focus here on the theft versus labor, because he says when you labor, instead of taking, which is the old self, you're giving. I like that. Instead of taking, you're giving. And then he talks about trash talk. He talks about unwholesome words coming out of our mouths. And I'd like to expand on that. I believe lots of times we as Christians need to take a position on even listening to unwholesome words. And we need to be sure that when we speak with edifying, giving grace with our words, using words for Christ, glory, and honor. Well, there's a lot to do, isn't it? Taking off the old, putting on the new. But the one thing we want to remember, without any doubt, is that once Christ has cleansed us, we need to be sure we don't put on the old filthy stuff. We need to be sure that we stay clean and keep the old dirty rags off. Make sure that we're in truth, forgiveness, laboring, giving, edifying. We need to be sure that we are built around righteousness, holiness, and truth, which is the likeness of God. That's my thought for the day. I hope it's your thought for the day. God bless you and have a great day.